I would like to start by giving a hug to everyone in the room. And we're going to start this outstanding program with a lecture delivered by my dear friend Izzeldin Abuelaish. I met Izzeldin when I was looking after children from Gaza who had been injured in a local conflict. I was at the Children's Hospital in Brussels, and I met with Izzeldin, and it was friendship at first sight. Since then, we did a lot together, and Izzeldin Abuelaish, who started his career as an obstetrician in Israel, after a personal tragedy that he will tell us about, moved to Canada and moved from obstetrics, as we understand it, to a metaphoric application of welcoming people into life and making sure that mothers and children are thriving to the best. He is now invested in public health. He is a professor of global health at the Peter Silverman Center for International Health, adjunct scientist at the Women's College Research Institute at the University of Toronto. He's a human rights beacon. He's been nominated to the Nobel Prize for Peace. And he founded a charity called Daughters for Life, promoting education for young women. I'm very glad that we can start this meeting with a lecture by Izzeldin Abuelaish entitled The Impact of War and Conflict on Women and Children.
Thank you so much. It's an inspiring gathering and hopeful one, because it's mentioned about the children and to have a brighter future. I see the children, they are the hope, they are the present and the future, and they deserve the care. And this gathering where we all come together, thank you all, and thanks to Dr. Katya Grolgar for inviting me and my friend Bernard. I want to ask, have any of you experienced war or conflict? Because hearing about war and conflict is different from living the war and conflict. Going to the sea, to see the sea is different from diving in the sea. And sinking and experiencing it, for me as a Palestinian, my life was a war. And even till now, but I never let all of it to stop me from dreaming and achieving what I am supposed to achieve, and to continue moving forward. The impact of war and conflict on women and the children, because we live in a time and the world full of challenges, unprecedented challenges, and even the war is dynamic it's not the used war we hear about it. War comes to the kitchen, to your bedroom, weaponization of everything in life. That's why when I want to speak about war as I experienced it, the objectives of this presentation, we need to stimulate debate on health effects of war, and also to understand the types of mental health problems that arise in armed conflict, and also to use health data to prevent war, because war is not to talk about it, is not to be documented. War is to be prevented, and also to hold governments to account. And we need to inform the general public, including the international community, about the levels of devastation caused by the conflict. But why I became interested in the study of impact of war and conflict? Stories, we read books, we read stories. Stories are not just to read. Stories are living experiences we need to practice and to take it as example for us, to learn from it. Our profession can shape our life, and life is what we make it. Always has been, always will be. So I became interested in the study of impact of war and conflict as a result of life experience. When 3 of my daughters and 1 niece were killed by an Israeli tank shell in 16th of January 2009, then I wrote my book, I Shall Not Hate, a Gaza Doctor's Journey on the Road to Peace and Human Dignity. And that's why, from medical to biopsychosocial, I felt the need of the study of the socio-endemic diseases, not to focus just on the medical aspect of it. It has a psychosocial impact, and that's during my work as obstetrician gynecologist at the Soroka University Hospital, where I used to cross the borders and to be labeled the Palestinian doctor, the Gaza doctor, because medicine and health are a human equalizer, stabilizer, socializer, and harmonizer. And we have a responsibility, moral, ethical, to practice it and to spread it. Violence, fear, conflict, and hatred is a universal scourge plague that tears all the fabric of communities and threatens the life and health of all of us. Hatred and violence are complicated problems and diseases and public health issues. They are not just feelings or attitudes or behaviors. One of the characteristics of modern violence is hatred. Incitement, racism, discrimination, hatred and violence across barriers and borders, and they are contagious. That's why we need to see war and the protracted conflict should be viewed as a disease, that we have to focus on it to prevent it. The World Health Organization defines violence as the intentional use of physical force or power, threatened or actual, against oneself, another person, or against a group or community that either results in or has a high likelihood of resulting in injury, death, psychological harm, maldevelopment, or deprivation. But who is affected in times of war and conflict? Firstly, during war, the first thing Women are the first to be affected. Children, they are affected. And third, the fabric of the community. And finally, women and the children may also be targeted in times of war, even weaponization of women and the children. Deepening a human misery comes not only from more war and violence, it also comes from the way many actors are pursuing a military and political objectives. Women and the children carry the bulk of the burden of war, conflicts, and disasters. Misery as a strategy in this world. I want to ask each of you, can you give a figure, a number for the cost of war in our world? No one can set up a figure for the cost of war, in particular, the long-term human suffering. Too often leaders, governments, and non-state armed groups gain from the deprivation and weaponization. As I said, misery as a strategy. Women are not homogeneous group also. And the impact on women differ greatly depending on the age, the class, the status, social context, and the type of conflict, if it is ethnic civil wars or interstate. Studies of the health effects of conflict on population have rarely focused on women. They put them in silo. To say 100 people, it's time to gender it about women and the children. With the exception of reproductive health, always we see women, just the pelvis, reproduction. We have to change it to see women during the life course, from early childhood up to later age. And most of the data on conflict, mortality and morbidity are not broken down by gender. Analysis of women's health often focus on is limited to specific periods of women's lives. We want to see women as a human being and the children. Women are seldom mentioned as a special group, but are lumped together with the children, as we call it, vulnerable groups. So health, development, and well-being depend on who you are and where you are. In the world, they are shaped by the environment and the context in which children they live. We should not judge them in a superficial way, and armed conflict has different impacts on the children based on who they are and where they are. Children account for 30% of the world's population, of those who are displaced, but 41% of all forcibly displaced people. That's about the children in times of war and conflict. And women and the children make up most of the people forcibly displaced by renewed conflict. We see it in Ukraine these days. We speak about military means used, but rarely to speak about women and the children. The same here about Syria, Yemen, many other countries in this world. Women and the children make up most of the people forcibly displaced by renewed conflict. 6.9 million people displaced within Syria. 70% of this population is women and the children. and the most challenging for them, lost safety and security and uncertainty and instability. And of course, refugees bear the brunt of COVID-19, lack of access, not to vaccination or protection, to essential primary healthcare needs. It's a war crime using civilian suffering, such as blocking access to food, water, and health services, as a method of war. Also, child marriage as a coping strategy. Sexual and gender-based violence. Women and girls are not just killed or wounded. They are raped, sexually attacked, mutilated, and humiliated. The impact of rape and other forms of sexual violence. It tears apart by the fabric of the society, the stigma, the intense psychological trauma, and of course, sexually transmitted diseases, unwanted pregnancies, lasting physical damage. 80% of Central American women, girls, are raped crossing into the United States. In Syria's war economy, women have become a form of currency, trade, and the child marriage, as I said, as a coping strategy. Women have been exchanged for money because they have nothing to give except their bodies. They have also been traded for weapons, goods, and services. Putting a price tag on women, this is bankruptcy of the humanity. The trade of Syrian women has also spilled over to the neighboring countries. The case of a father who sold his 19-year-old daughter into a marriage with the 65-year-old man in exchange for his help crossing the border. And also their mental health, the wounds that last too long and to be transgenerational. The research found the mental well-being of children, young people, and caregivers have dramatically deteriorated since similar study in 2008, with number of children reporting emotional distress increasing to 80% from 55%. "85% of Gaza's child population, which is about 800,000 children, have never known life outside the blockade. 50% of the population of the Gaza Strip, which is equivalent to the population of Slovenia, living in 360 square kilometers, 50% of them are children. From 2000 till now, they experienced 6 wars. 99% of caregivers reported an increase in their children feeling fearful and anxious since the May of 2021 escalation. One of the children said, "I wish what happened to me would not happen to anyone." These words should resonate with the politicians in our world. These are the children who care about others. My books were lost. My toys were gone. My room was gone. Everything is gone. children's feeling unsafety. And that's behavioral manifestations of children and young people distress, aggressive behaviors. No one is born violent or aggressive. It's the context, it's the environment, it's man-made. Don't blame anyone. It's nurtured, not by nature. Irritable, restless. All of this will impact the well-being, and they will be disabled. Man-made disability. 79% of caregivers reported an increase in bedwetting, compared with 53% in 2018. How children and caregivers are coping. One child said, I stopped feeling afraid while hugging my mother. And that's the importance of hugging, the support. Children and caregivers have lost confidence in their ability to pursue their goals. Children feel less supported by their family and friends. Disabled community. Children have limited feelings of hope. And that's one of the children, what they said. If God wills, the war will end and our future will be different. And we will live a beautiful life with each other and with our families. The blockade limits our dreams. Children don't dare to even dream. I wish I could go to Jerusalem or visit other cities in the West Bank. If the blockade was removed today, I think I would feel more connected to the whole world. The glimpse of hope. I wish the future to be better for me. I feel very happy when riding my bike and was happy when my big brother and I went to Gaza and got me the bike. Many also agreed that they experienced feeling of happiness. In spite of all of that, children, they are the source of happiness and hope, confident and energetic. How these children, they find these challenges as opportunities and not to let all of these challenges to stop them from dreaming and move forward. And also, they report online hatred increasing against minorities, against the refugees. Millions are victims of hate crime, though many never report them. And the intersectionality between women and the children's suffering. The specific way that women and the children are affected by war can vary depending on a range of intersecting factors. The education, the family status, the race, the age, the occupation. Women who belong to marginalized ethnic or religious groups may face additional discrimination or violence, while children from lower socioeconomic background may be more likely to experience malnutrition or lack of access to education. Mental health. Children suffer fear of kidnapping and explosions. 92% found to have related learning impediments. The only thing they have on their minds are guns, bullets, death, and the fear of the United States occupation. These are Iraqi children. The impact of war on Yemen also. Yemen's women and the children bear the consequences of Western blockade, airstrikes, and conflict in the country. But most important, the post-conflict, the physical, the mental, the economic, and the health. and how to reconstruct after destruction. It depends on the prior status of the health system. And most literature focus on women as victims, neglecting the actions women take as principal actors and beneficiaries of the conflict. The impact is negative and positive. And when we speak about development in post-conflict, for every year of civil war, a country's growth rate falls by an estimated 2.2%. The average cost of one conflict is nearly equivalent to the value of annual development aid worldwide. And an example, the war in Yemen. If the war to stop in 2030, it takes them back to 1990. It drags the country 40 years backwards. How can they develop? Who is going to take responsibility? So I think it's important for us, between what we know and what is needed, and in your meeting, how can we fill the gap in our knowledge and action? So the next step, we need to do the research, to have the evidence, in order to inform the public, the politicians, those who wage war, in order to transform them. War and the protracted conflict should be viewed as a disease. And diseases are not to be managed. Diseases are to be prevented. War and the protracted conflict to be viewed as a complex disease process that attacks the global group organism, humankind. This disease having risk factors that can be prevented from developing, and that's what we focus, the primary prevention, whose effects we must treat, and then secondary prevention, and the third is the tertiary prevention, where we start the management and the rehabilitation. Today's global health situation and the human well-being raises urgent questions about justice. I believe in the value of rightness, equality, justice. Healthcare, disease, and illness are not and can't be confined to geographical boundaries and population. So a collaboration between political scientists and public health researchers and the professionals could provide a firmer basis for attempts to prevent conflicts. Unfortunately, the two professions seem to have little connections. So it's time, as you mentioned, to have interdisciplinary, multidisciplinary approach in a comprehensive approach. Combining their research would give both sides a more complete approach and would help focus the attention of the international community on efforts to protect populations from consequences of conflict. It's my solid belief that safeguarding dignity, safety, and well-being of human beings in any conflict exceeds any other consideration. Building close ties between people is one of the most effective ways of preventing conflict over the long term. These ties should be built on equality, respect, and freedom. It's to these people, the hundreds of thousands of men, women, and the children who crave a normal, peaceful, and economically stable life, that the international community must devote greater attention. It's they who collectively represent the best chance for peace, and yet are ironically compelled to bear the brunt of its perennial absence. The questions: academics, health professionals, and public health programs, what is the role of academic public health programs in promoting, protecting, and bringing peace and preventing war. Health is more than biology. It's a social, mental, spiritual harmony, equality, justice, and freedom. Peace goes beyond conflict resolution. It's forgiveness, trust, and reconciliation. Peace goes beyond an argument won. Health and peace are truly one. All of this is meant to say the greater vulture wouldn't have its way. The fight for our rights wouldn't cease. Peace is health, and health is peace. Is there any reason for hope? Your conference and gathering is the reason for hope. So we need to move from competition to collaboration, cooperation, and complementation and partnership, from exclusive to inclusive, from patchwork cult to comprehensive approach. The children, girls, women are the author of the survival story of the world. They are the heroes. They are the ones behind the success. And that's what I believe. For any human being, freedom is essential, crucial to our dignity and our ability to be fully human. So it's time we faced the pandemic of COVID. It's time to have a paradigm shift, a pandemic of justice, equality, equity, freedom, and to replace disability with ability. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Abuelaish. That was inspiring. And it is hugely inspiring, that phrase, health is peace and peace is health. And it is something which we will certainly remember, both as individuals and as an organization, our responsibilities. We do have a little bit of time, so if you don't mind, we would see if anybody has any questions and things for you. And it's very difficult to see because of the lights. If anybody has questions, you can raise your hand or you can just give us a shout. Yes, please. Actually, 1 minute. Do we have a microphone, please? We have? Dr. Abuelaish, do you want to come back to the podium, please? Thank you, William.
Okay, that was highly inspiring, and I can't help I totally agree with what you've just said, but then I have in mind all the research on health inequalities, which has existed since 1830, and before then maybe. And for me, it's not a question of evidence, it's a question of will. And the problem is that if you try to talk to Republicans in the United States, for example, about this sort of thing at time being, you might not get a very healthy response. Well, this is, maybe I'm kind of skeptical about it, but I hope we can get there. But I'm not totally sure, without a complete change of political will, that this is possible. How can you solve the environmental crisis if we have wars going on? So it's really a reaction rather than a question. Lots of interrogations there.
So what is so it's a comment, not a question.
The weight of the problem is so huge, and as far as evidence is concerned, I think we have all the evidence in the world. We've got to go beyond the evidence. We have the evidence. We have evidence on health inequality. But we still have huge health inequality.
So what is the cause? That's what when we have a disease, when we have a disabled child, we ask what is the diagnosis, and we are not threatened by the problem to face a medical health issue. We as health professionals, once we have the truth, once we have the diagnosis, we can set up the right treatment, but not to say it's a big issue, it's difficult to solve. This means we don't want to hide our heads in sand, but the opposite, to face it with courage, with goodwill, as we face many other challenges in this world. So I think nothing, even personally, nothing is impossible in life. I don't believe there is impossible thing in life. The only impossible thing in life I believe in is to return my daughters back to life. But everything in life, from where did I come as a Palestinian refugee, where I am now here, and what I achieved, I wasn't born with the golden spoon, but we succeeded. And as I said, life is what we make it, always has been, always will be. The biggest challenge to humanity is individual responsibility. By denying, by blaming others, it's time to shift it from blaming to take responsibility and doing your part. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Abuelaish. Inspiring words and also a reminder of our responsibilities, individually and collectively. It may not seem like a disease, but it is a disease, and it is something which we need to be aware of. And as an organization, certainly the EACD is moving firmly towards speaking up and taking a children's rights approach to all our approach in everything that we do. Thank you very much.